We got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field. That's how we'll keep moving forward. That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Healthcare and housing are human rights. And the government stays the hell out of your bedroom. That's how we make America a place where no child is left hungry, where no community is left behind, where nobody gets told they don't belong. That's how we're going to fight. And as the next president of the United States always says, when we fight, when we fight, when we fight, thank you. God bless.
Stand up.
Yeah, we are off recapping day 3 of the DNC, and I've got 2 amazing guests, one representing the labor movement, organized labor, unions, and more. That is my good friend Rick Smith, and one representing the youth of America. It's Andre Treiber, the president of the DNC Youth Delegation. Both join me on today's episode of Stand Up. And I'll be checking in with our DNC correspondent, our very own Abigail Hummel will join me at some point tomorrow. She was unable to tape with me because she's running around so much, doing such a great job, and she got a ticket to go be in the arena last night, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing from her. And I've heard from such great feedback from everybody who is loving Abigail's appearances here on the show. She's doing a great job, and I'm looking forward to talking to her later. But right now, I've got your headlines and your clips recapping the DNC Night 3. People love the recaps, of course, of every day's news, but especially of the DNC. Have been getting great feedback on this as well. And so I am here for you, and you are there for me. Thank you very much for listening, for pressing play, for supporting the show with a review, with a rating, with a recommendation. Many have been recommending the show to friends, and you can do it all at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Join our community. Be a part of our amazing group of generous, kind, thoughtful, curious, hilarious folks. So many of you hopefully will join me tonight at our live hangout. We will be live at QED, which is a venue in Queens, a comedy club in Queens, owned by Christian Finnegan's wife, Canberra Cruz. And I will be there with Christian, JL Covan, and more. So you can join us if you're a paid subscriber on the Zoom. You can be in the room with us virtually at least. I don't know how that's going to go. And I really do look forward to seeing many of you. So I might have to hold a Zoom tomorrow as well, just to recap everything on Friday night. Look for a possible hangout there as well. And I will definitely see you one way or another, I hope. You can always see us and connect with us in the Discord platform that goes along with this podcast and the show each and every day, 24/7. All right. Let me read some headlines to you right now, as I do every day. Here is the news that I've got for you. All right, we might need to get back to some jingles. I don't want to have to do that to you again. Let's go to the Middle East, where Israel and Hezbollah exchange strikes. The Israeli military launched airstrikes in Lebanon that said it had struck weapon storage facilities used by Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed militia. And in response, because that's how it works, Hezbollah said it had targeted an Israeli military base in the Golan Heights. The strikes by both sides are highlighting how months of diplomatic efforts have failed to ease hostilities along the Israel-Lebanon border. Also in Jerusalem, hundreds of ultra-Orthodox Israeli men clashed with police officers over a court decision ordering them to be drafted. They have mandatory service in Israel, but there was this exception for the ultra-Orthodox folks, men, and no longer, apparently. I mean, I followed that when it happened, but it's an interesting story. Number one, just that they have mandated service. I think we should have that too, not necessarily for the military. I digress. In a related story, a senior Iranian military official said on Tuesday that retaliation against Israel over the killing of Hamas leader in Tehran may be long in coming and take any number of forms, suggesting that an attack against Israel may have been placed on hold. All right, let's go to Russia, where authorities are saying that Moscow has come under a sizable drone attack overnight. Apparently it didn't damage any, report any damage or any casualties. There probably were some, but they didn't want to say. And now let's go to the results of the Supreme Court's decision to get rid of affirmative action. MIT, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, where our own Kevin Richburg went, maybe others, reported a significant drop in Black and Hispanic enrollment. In the first data from a highly selective university after the Supreme Court banned affirmative action, I reached out to Eric Siegel on that last night, making sure that he saw that story, and he emailed back, "Yup, tragic. Just read a new article by two real historians saying there's zero basis for a colorblind principle as some originalist matter." But of course, the justices don't care. But at least last night was great. I love even his optimism. Next story. Okay, all right, calm down. Yesterday, lawmakers called on insurance regulators to detail their efforts against, quote, troubling practices with their health insurance tactics. Lawmakers zeroing in on a firm multi-plan that has helped insurers cut payments while sometimes leaving patients with large bills. I don't like it, but I do like that there are lawmakers on top of it. Of course, they're all Democrats. And news from Ford, the automaker, saying that it would invest less in battery-powered cars and scrap a planned electric 3-row sport utility vehicle. They said they would delay their new electric pickup truck by 18 months. Ford said that their investments in electric vehicles would now account for about 30% of their company's capital budget, down from 40%. And it's all about profits. They're not making as much money on electric cars as gas cars. That isn't the reason why they shouldn't be built and why we shouldn't buy them, of course. Also, what'll happen when your electric car lasts for 20 years and a million miles? And the battery, it takes minutes to charge. And you can go like 500 to 1,000 miles on it. That is the future, my friends. I mean, I do worry about the worker at Ford and other automakers if that's the case, but it's going to be the case, I'm pretty sure. And here's some good news. A worst case scenario about the climate crisis may be more remote than previously thought. This is about the Antarctic ice sheet and it breaking off. Read about it at the New York Times new study saying this, and that's good news. I'll take it. More good news. Two recent studies have added to the growing body of evidence that a meat-heavy diet may increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's good news. I shouldn't have said that. I meant this. The FDA is expected to approve the new COVID vaccine as early as today, according to two sources familiar with the agency's plan. And it's the third time vaccines have been updated to match circulating strains since the original series. The shots should be available within days. I do think that is good news. And I think this is, too, that a development from this weird story in January, a company that sent deceptive calls to New Hampshire voters using artificial intelligence to mimic President Joe Biden's voice. Well, that company has agreed yesterday, to pay a $1 million fine, which is good because you can't do that. It's illegal. Their name is Lingo Telecom, the voice service provider that transmitted the robocalls, and they agreed to the settlement to resolve enforcement action taken by the FCC, which we like to see. It initially set a $2 million fine, but we will take it. We the people, that is. And a little bit more good news from the government doing its job, which is what these last few stories have been. The Justice Department said yesterday that it plans to press ahead with obstruction charges against two January 6 defendants, despite the Supreme Court's recent ruling that the limited scope of federal statute makes it a felony to obstruct many government proceedings. Prosecutors contended they can still prove that the two defendants, a married couple from Ohio, are guilty of obstructing Congress even under the High Court's narrow interpretation of the law. The defendants, whose names are Don and Shondale Chilcote, because of course they are. Don and Shondale. They're accused of surging with the mob onto the Senate floor during the riot at the Capitol. And in a related story, a lawyer for the Oath Keepers who helped organize the January 6, 2021 insurrection attack on the U.S. Capitol with right-wing extremist groups pled guilty also yesterday to obstruction of justice and entering a restricted area. And wanting to halt defections to South Korea, the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un has ordered the construction of new border walls, reaffirmed guard posts, and installed more landmines. North Koreans keep finding creative ways to flee, but unfortunately, they are building this wall, and they're probably going to have to build it themselves, and I don't think South Korea is going to pay for it. Okay, those are your headlines from yesterday. All of it pretty much unrelated to the DNC, but let's get to that now. It was Oprah, Clinton, and the coach. Some quick takeaways from Tim Walz's night at the DNC, a star-studded night of speakers. Everybody's saying it was a member of the audience who delivered the most unforgettable moment. It was Gus Walz, Tim Walz's son, who was crying and yelling, "That's my dad." 17-year-old son of the Minnesota governor shouted and pointed as his father accepted the party's vice presidential nomination. Gus has a nonverbal learning disorder, ADHD, and anxiety disorder, and it went viral. And I've heard from Tina Winsett and other families who have kids in similar situations who were so moved by it and think it's very important to normalize young folks, anybody that is dealing with any of that or has been diagnosed with any of those conditions. Oprah surprised the audience at the DNC as well as a night that featured Stevie Wonder, John Legend, Mindy Kaling, Kenan Thompson, poet Amanda Gorman. But it was Oprah who stole the show with her first ever speech at a national convention. Let's get to those clips and start now. Chicago's own Oprah Winfrey.
We are not so different from our neighbors. When a house is on fire, we don't ask about the homeowner's race or religion. We don't wonder who their partner is or how they voted. No. We just try to do the best we can to save them. And if the place happens to belong to a childless cat lady.
Oprah taking a dig at one of her ingenues. That's right, J.D. Vance. She had supported him a lot with his dumb book, Hillbilly. But last night wasn't one of them.
We try to get that cat out too.
All right, there you go, Oprah. You know, I've got to fade some of the crowd out when I'm going through these clips, but I hate to do it. It's great to witness it live, but here on the recap, sorry, it's got to be done. Let's go on to Hakeem Jeffries, who I thought was hilarious and effective, and hopefully the next Speaker of the House. He absolutely nukes Donald Trump with this metaphor that's just perfect.
The road ahead will not be easy, which brings me to you-know-who. Donald Trump is like an old boyfriend who you broke up with, but he just won't go away. He has spent the last 4 years spinning the block, trying to get back into a relationship with the American people. Bro, we broke up with you for a reason.
And just an editorial or show note, as you listen to these clips, know that these are the ones that I selected. These are the clips that I kind of curated, that I liked, that I edited this part of them. Just because they're focused on Donald Trump a lot in these clips doesn't mean that that was the focus of the night. I think generally speaking, what we've seen is, yes, of course they go after Trump, the opponent, the nightmare that he is, but then they turn hopeful and optimistic when they talk about Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the future ahead led by Democrats. But that's just a show note, just so, whenever you hear these clips or these news stories, this is what I've aggregated for you to try to give you as much context as possible. No different than anything from the PBS NewsHour to Democracy Now!, all the way up to CNN's 8 o'clock hour and the Greg Gutfeld show. You pick the clips and the stories and the guests. It's all editorial, and I'm so grateful that you like the choices that I'm making. So generally, what impacts you the most people, and what's in the public's interest. All right, let's move back to night 3 of the DNC with Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, focused on taking back the narrative on the issue of immigration. I love this guy, and I thought this was very well done. One of Kamala Harris's former colleagues in the U.S. Senate, it's Chris Murphy.
On the Statue of Liberty is a poem. The last line reads, "I lift my lamp beside the golden door." For generations, that lamp has called people to start a brave new life in America. My ancestors, your ancestors, and the parents of the next President of the United States of America. Kamala Harris knows that we can be a nation of proud immigrants and a nation of strong immigration laws. That's why when she's president, she will bring that border bill back, and Kamala Harris is going to pass it. How do I know this? Because in this race, there is only one candidate who has ever been willing to do the worthy, redeeming work of making our country better, of recognizing that we do not have to choose between celebrating our heritage and enforcing our laws, right? The beautiful thing about America is that we can be both. We can be a nation of immigrants who love their country and a nation with a secure border. And there is only one candidate. There is only one candidate who can deliver that vision of America, and it's Kamala Harris.
All right, there you go. Senator Chris Murphy taking back the narrative on immigration. I really like that. And of course, we love Pete Buttigieg. He was great on Fox News yesterday. He always is, which is why I thought this was a hilarious way for him to introduce himself. Not that pretty much everybody there doesn't know who he is. Here's a little bit of the Buttigieg, America's mayor, the Secretary of Transportation, and the future of the Democratic Party.
I never thought I'd hear myself saying. I'm Pete Buttigieg, and you might recognize me from Fox News. I believe in going anywhere, in service of a good cause, and friends, we gather in a very good cause, electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the next president and vice president of the United States.
All right, Pete Buttigieg. You know what? Let me give you a little bit more. That was just the opening, the beginning. Let me give you something a little bit meatier from Pete Buttigieg.
And don't even get me started on his new running mate. At least Mike Pence was polite. J.D. Vance is one of those guys who thinks if you don't live the life that he has in mind for you, then you don't count. Someone who said that if you don't have kids, you have, quote, no physical commitment to the future of this country. You know, Senator, when I deployed to Afghanistan, I didn't have kids then. Many of the men and women who went outside the wire with me didn't have kids either. But let me tell you, our commitment to the future of this country was pretty damn physical. Choosing a guy like J.D. Vance to be America's next vice president sends a message. And the message is that they are doubling down on negativity and grievance. Committing to a concept of campaigning best summed up in one word: darkness. Darkness is what they are selling. The thing is, I just don't believe that America today is in the market for darkness.
Yeah, America's not in the market for darkness. He delivers an optimistic tone, as almost every speaker turns to, but that didn't stop J.D. Vance from saying this last night to Jay Tapper on CNN. I promise you it's not long.
I thought it was actually a very dark and ominous tone where they attacked Donald Trump and they attacked the people who voted for him rather than offer a compelling vision for the future. So it fell flat to my ears. Of course, the American people will make the ultimate decision.
Yes, we will. And it won't be you, buddy. Gosh, that guy just keeps disgracing himself every single day. All right, I just said that Pete Buttigieg is the future of the Democratic Party. Here's the past of the Democratic Party. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on Bill Clinton, and I'm not a fan. I don't think I ever was, but here he is last night.
2 days ago, I turned 78, the oldest man in my family of 4 generations. And the only personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
Yeah, the audience there loved that one. Bill Clinton, that's all I've got for you on him right now. And here's another governor who is the future of the Democratic Party. He was considered as a VP candidate. I love this guy. I've met him. I've interviewed him. I've talked to him. I'm friendly with him. It's Wes Moore of Maryland delivering a zinger.
Now, I joined the Army when I was 17. In fact, I was too young to sign the paperwork. I had to ask my mom to sign the paperwork for me because I don't have bone spurs.
Just another veteran, Wes Moore. So good. And you know what? Let's give you a little bit more impactful comments from his speech last night, the Maryland governor. Recalling Kamala Harris being among the first to call him in March after a bridge collapse in Baltimore killed 6 people and shut down an international port there.
Because making America great doesn't mean telling people you're not wanted. Because making America great and loving your country does not mean lying about its history. Making America great means saying the ambitions of this country would be incomplete without your help. America great means saying the ambitions of it's the legacy would be incomplete without of those 6 workers who fixed potholes on a bridge while we slept. Of those 6 workers who were born in a different country, but who knew that America was big enough for them too.
Good stuff. I'd love to get him back on the show at some point. I promise you I will. All right, let's now go to one of the most celebrated poets in America. This is Amanda Gorman. She was at the DNC last night. Of course, she was made famous when she delivered the poem at the inauguration of Joe Biden on January 20th, 2021. Part of her brief comments last night.
We gather at this hallowed place because we believe in the American dream. We face a race that tests if this country we cherish shall perish from the earth, and if our earth shall perish from this country. It falls to us to ensure that we do not fall for a people that cannot stand together, cannot stand at all. We are one family, regardless of religion, class, or color. For what defines a patriot is not just our love of liberty, but our love for one another. This is loud in our country's call because while we all love freedom, it is love that frees us all.
So good. So very, very good. Talented young woman. I think she's going places. All right. Now let's go to the governor of Pennsylvania who didn't get the VP nod, but he's not bitter. It's Josh
Kamala Harris
Shapiro with a barn burner.
Well, she has spent her entire career making progress. Donald Trump, a man with no guardrails, wants to take away our rights and our freedoms. And listen, while he cloaks himself in the blanket of freedom, what he's offering isn't freedom at all. Because hear me on this, it's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. No, it's not. And it's not freedom to tell women what they can do with their bodies. And hear me on this, it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he gets to pick the winner. That's not freedom. But you know what? You know what, Democrats? We are the party of real freedom. That's right. The kind of real freedom that comes when that child has a great public school with an awesome teacher because we believe in her future. Real freedom that comes when we invest in the police and in the community so that child can walk to and from school and get home safely to her mama. Real freedom that comes when she can join a union, marry who she loves, start a family on her own terms, breathe clean air, drink pure water, worship how she wants, and live a life of purpose where she is respected for who she is.
All right, there you go. Well done, Josh Shapiro. I hate to do this to you, but let's go back to Bill Clinton just because of this statistic that he puts in this. Hopefully this isn't too tricky.
You're going to have a hard time believing this, but so help me, I triple checked it. Since the end of the Cold War in 1989, America has created about 51 million new jobs. I swear I checked this 3 times. Even I couldn't believe it. What's the score? Democrats 50, Republicans 1.
All right, and they rolled out the Republicans last night for us again. Olivia Troy worked for the Trump administration, worked for Mike Pence, I believe. She's a national security expert, and she is supporting Democrats and Kamala Harris.
Inside Trump's White House was terrifying. But what keeps me up at night is what will happen if he gets back there. The guardrails are gone. The few adults in the room the first time resigned or were fired. I grew up in the kind of working family that Trump pretends to care about. Conservative, Catholic, Texan. July 4th was our most sacred holiday. Those values made me a Republican. And they're the same values that make me proud to support Kamala Harris. Not because we agree on every issue, but because we agree on the most important issue, protecting our freedom. So to my fellow Republicans, you aren't voting for a Democrat. You're voting for democracy. You aren't betraying our party. You're standing up for our country.
All right, there you go. Olivia Troy making the case for conservative Republicans to support Kamala Harris and Democrats. We've never seen anything like it, and she wasn't the only one. There were far more. Let's get quickly to Jared Polis. He's the governor of Colorado. Lots of speakers last night pounded on Project 2025. They carry that big book out there. I think it's such effective messaging. Here's Jared Polis.
Page 451 says the only legitimate family is a married mother and father where only the father works. You know what? I'm going to take that one out. I'm going to put that in my pocket so I can share it with undecided voters so they better understand what's at stake this election.
All right, here's a very powerful and very effective, well-liked Attorney General of Michigan. Her name is Dana Nessel, and she was great last night.
We know when she takes an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, she's actually read it. We know that she'll appoint Supreme Court justices who will protect our freedoms. And let me tell you, Kamala knows you go from the courthouse to the White House, not the other way around.
Yeah, Dana Nessel, but this was the line that went one of the most viral lines of the night. Dana Nessel, of course, is gay. I say, of course, only because you need the context for this line.
By the way, I got a message for the Republicans and the justices of the United States Supreme Court. You can pry this wedding band from my cold, dead, gay hand.
Here is Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, also the co-chair of the DNC and a close friend of Kamala Harris. And I've interviewed him several times, and I can tell you, huge hands, large man, Cory Booker.
You got to generate the joy. That hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so tonight, there are so many challenges in our nation. There are so many problems that we're facing. Heck, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. But yet we will be joyful warriors. We are going to bring back to the journey of our nation joy. And if there's any tradition in America that has helped us to generate that joy, it has been the artists of America.
All right, there you go, Cory Booker. And that is it for the audio. That's all I've got for you. What did I miss? Sorry if there was something that you liked that you wanted to rehear, but hopefully you appreciated that. If you did miss it, I think that's a pretty great roundup. You're not going to find too many other places as tightly edited as I just did, although I've always got issues here editing. I'm no expert. Yesterday I heard from Joel Bates who said my audio was a little too low, and lately the show has been that way. I want to hear those notes. I'm always tinkering using two different computers and different software. Well, generally the same software, but always want to hear your notes, so let me know what I can do better. But let's get to my first guest, shall we? It's time for Rick Smith. He is the host of The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk coast to coast on your radio, your TV, wherever you get your favorite podcasts each and every day. Rick is a great guy, good friend of mine and my show. I join him often, and he is a Teamster. He is always talking about organized labor, the labor movement, which is why I wanted to have him on. He's there at the DNC on Radio Row, and we had a great conversation. He's always fired up. I always love talking to him. Super smart guy. Here he is, Rick Smith. Right now, go to thericksmithshow.com, follow him everywhere, and let him know that you heard him here. I'm very happy to have you from Chicago at the DNC. Look at you, all set up. You told me you were going like a year ago. You're like, are you going? I'm like, I hurt my knee.
No, I wanted you to go. It would have been great to have you here.
I have so much FOMO. I absolutely should have gone, but I'm talking to as many people as I can, trying to get as much out of it as I can. But a great place to be seen and heard. And as you told me before I hit record, this is unprecedented. What you're seeing here in terms of this Democratic Party being so pro-labor. How would you describe the past and what's changed?
Well, the reality is right now, this is the Labor Party. For people who are going, hey, we need a Labor Party. Well, the Democratic Party right now is that Labor Party. And that's a huge thing for me to say, because they've not always been. Everywhere you look in this convention, there's something about labor. There's something about working families. There's something about making lives better. And that, to me, again, is incredible. Now, understand, I'm never a huge Bill Clinton fan. In fact, not a fan at all.
Yeah.
Wasn't really a huge Obama fan. The story I have about Obama is that when he was candidate Obama, all in on labor. I got to meet him twice, shook his hand twice. He told me both times we're going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. We got nothing at all. And look, here's a guy who has the softest hands of any man I've ever met in my life. If I had hands like that, I'd never leave the house. But it doesn't surprise me that they didn't get anything done, because not really their world. I look at what Joe Biden has set forth, the path that they've set, transformational. The guy who is the most pro-union president in my lifetime, who found Obama's comfortable shoes, walked on that picket line, and Kamala Harris, who walked on a picket line before he did. This is a great team. And now you see Harris and Walz. Walz, a guy who was a union member for years, did amazing things in Minnesota for unions. I see great stuff when this duo is elected in November.
All right, well, give me the complaints about it. Is there anything that this Democratic Party you think is coming up short on in terms of labor, what they could do more, talk about?
Oh, look, we can always do more in my view. I mean, I'd love to see the PRO Act passed tomorrow. I'd love to see, the end of Taft-Hartley. I'd love to see what Biden has started and that is government encouraging people to collectively bargain. If you remember, go back to the National Labor Relations Act. The original intent of that act was for government to encourage employers and employees to come together and collectively bargain to solve problems locally. So you didn't have theft of federal laws or state laws. You solved problems at the bargaining table. I believe that we haven't done enough of that. We're starting, but on the right path.
How important is the Supreme Court to working folks, to organize labor? They've done so much make it so much harder for folks. So there have been several decisions. We could go through them, but, more importantly, looking to the future, if there's anything you can do to change the makeup of the court, we could talk about it. Wouldn't that make a huge difference?
Absolutely. I've been saying for a while, Republicans have been their wet dream is to take us back to the Lochner era. That era where government could do nothing to impose minimum wage laws, maximum hour laws, safe working condition laws, child labor laws. They want to take it back to the time where if you're hungry enough, desperate enough to work for deplorable wages in horrible conditions, it was your liberty, Pete. It was your right, your freedom to work for poverty wages and horrible conditions. They want to bring that. They want to make that great again. And oh, by the way, they want mom and dad competing with the kids in the workplace, because I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of Republican states are going after child labor laws. So putting kids back into the workplace to compete with mom and dad, that's like CEO crack. That's like the heroin for the boardroom so that we can get more cheap labor.
So much could change and so much would be different if you have obviously Kamala Harris as president than Donald Trump again. And one thing that we've seen is, you said such a huge amount of support from organized labor for this Democratic Party, for Joe Biden, for lots of different reasons. But last night to see Sean Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers,
that is leadership.
Stage.
That is leadership. What you saw out of Sean Fain, pure leadership in my view.
Go ahead, expand why you think what's so effective. What is he doing that's so effective?
Well, a couple of things. In the speech itself, he wasn't just talking to the people in the convention hall. He was talking to those Cornell workers who are right now organized. He was talking to his members at Stellantis who are going to get laid off. He was talking to his members, but also in the broader sense, talking to working people about the only way we're going to take on corporate greed is to come together. And I love the fact that he quoted the poet Nelly. He broke out into the Trump is a scab T-shirt. I think the word scab is something that needs to get back into our vocabulary so that when people like Trump cross picket lines, we remember that. And as working people, we hold them accountable. I was just telling a friend, John Nichols, here a minute ago about when after my mother passed, I moved in with my grandparents. And there was a house caddy corner to my grandparents' house. My grandfather said, I catch you over there, I'm going to whip your ass. And I didn't ask why at the time, but about 10 years later, I go, why? What was that all about? Turns out the guy crossed a railroad picket like 50 years ago. And the entire community basically ostracized him because you didn't do that.
Wow.
You didn't do that to your fellow workers. And I think right now we're rediscovering a little bit about that. And the militancy of Sean Fain to come out with that kind of a statement, I think that's just great stuff.
Yeah, you use the word militancy, and we're hearing this change in rhetoric. If when we fight, we win. This doesn't sound like our Democratic Party that we're used to and grew up. What do you make of the different messaging and the language that you're hearing from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Democrats in general?
No, look, the rhetoric of the past was when they go low, we do what? We go high. That was what they kept telling us. As where I was saying at the time, no, when they go low, you smash their face into the ground. So they never do it again. I've always said Democrats have been the party that in a street fight will be happy to hold your coat. I look at someone like Tim Walz. You hand him your coat during a fight, he's going to put it over your head and beat you with it. And that's the difference, I think. I think there's some bite in this dog. I think there's some fight in these folks. And I think they're tired of getting pushed around. And this is great stuff. A friend of mine, Stephanie Miller, said, hey, we've got some alpha liberals. And that's about damn time.
Yeah, they're even using the language that the conservatives used for years, like freedom and liberty.
Who doesn't believe in freedom and liberty? You know what freedom is, Pete? Freedom is having the kind of wages that allow you to take a day off every once in a while, to talk about democracy. The freedom is about having health security so that when you get sick, you don't fear going bankrupt. Retirement security gives you freedom that knows when you're going to get old, you're not going to have to eat cat food. That's freedom, Pete. Not the garbage that they keep spewing at us, which I don't even understand.
Well, I mean, it always comes back to your feelings on the role of government. And I like a government that's responsible, that's not corrupted, that passes laws that protect me. Freedom is also knowing that what's in the food and drugs I take is not going to kill me. And sometimes it does, and government's never perfect, but freedom is having a government that protects you from predators, corporate predators that wouldn't have any regulations on those types of things, not to mention the banks and housing and so on. So
all of that. No, look, I had another friend stop by who I haven't seen in a long time because he moved to London. And he said that in London, he pays a 4.5% tax to get health insurance. He has cradle to grave health insurance for 4.5% of his income. When I sat down and I did the math on my own health insurance, which I have the greatest health care you could possibly get thanks to my Teamster union negotiating these incredible benefits, but I pay mightily about 25%. So would I love to pay a 4% tax to get health care from cradle to grave that covers what I need? You bet your damn ass I would.
You've been talking to labor leaders for years. You're talking to them this week. You just talked to Randi Weingarten, and I love her. What do unions do to turn out to vote? What does that look like? And how important is a union endorsement for any candidate at any level? What does it actually turn into?
Well, it turns into, the organization getting out and talking to their members and explaining, what it is about this candidate that is the reason we endorse. I look at true leadership. Someone like, the guy who's the head of LIUNA, who was on the stage on Monday night, whose membership is, more than split Republican to Democrat. But the idea of we're going to endorse because it's in the best interest of the institution. We saw what Trump did for 4 years, and it's about educating their members of what had happened and what this administration has done and what they're going to do. I look at my own union, the Teamsters. I've been a member for 35 years now. The fact that they haven't endorsed is a disgrace. The fact that Sean O'Brien was speaking at the RNC and talking nicely about J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley and calling Trump a tough SOB and someone with a backbone, that's disgraceful in my view. Knowing that what happened those 4 years and that Joe Biden bailed out the multi-employer pension fund with the Butch Lewis Act, the Teamsters fund that so desperately needed it. To me, there's leadership, and then there's putting your finger into the wind and hoping you're right.
Gosh, it's so good to talk to you, Rick. I'm so glad you're there at the DNC with your show, and maybe I'll check in with you again later this week. And I also want to come out to Pennsylvania and try to figure out if there's any difference I can make. Just give me as I let you go, your forecast on the states that you know pretty well and who you think they're going to vote for.
I think Pennsylvania is going to go blue. I think the energy has just like I've never seen. But more importantly, in the center part of the state where I'm at, the flags are coming down. The MAGA flags, the Trump flags, the F. Biden flags, all that stuff seems to be coming down. The red hats seem to be not as boisterous. So it seems potentially some people stay home, which would be the best outcome.
Well, maybe they're just trying to be relevant, and they know Biden's no longer the nominee, even though Trump doesn't know it, and they haven't gotten their fuck Harris and all those, flags and shirts. Maybe they're just waiting. They're just.
It's anything is possible, but I'm not seeing that. And the energy coming out of Philadelphia, from what I'm being told, is at Obama era levels.
Yeah.
And in Pennsylvania, you know it. As Philadelphia goes, the state goes.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right. I am so glad to talk to you. I'll let you go talk to much more important people. I'm so happy to talk to you today. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, there he goes, Rick Smith. Thank you so much. Please go let him know that you heard him here on the show. Follow him on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and of course, listen to him and find his show wherever you get your podcast, thericksmithshow.com for more. All right. Well, of course, we don't have Abigail Hummel right here today on this episode, but I'll catch up with her later and put that out for subscribers and then later probably for everybody. But she did meet so many great people that she's suggested to me. I've already booked 2 of them. And right now, let's introduce one of them, Andre Treiber. He is the chair of the DNC Youth Council, and he is from Texas, where he has worked on several different campaigns and for a member of the State House right now. Real smart guy. I was very happy to catch up with this young man who has great answers, great advice, inspiration, and made me feel real good about the future and especially of Texas. Let's do it right now with Andre Treiber. Follow him on Twitter. Support all of his work. Go to the show notes. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. Let's do it. Yes, I've just told you all about him, and here he is joining me for the first time. Andre, what an honor to have you joining me from the DNC. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I heard great things from Abigail Hummel about your work, the conference, and what you're doing. But now that I get to talk to you directly, I want to learn a little bit about your work, or as much as I can. But first, just about you. You're a Texas boy, or man, I guess now, right?
Yeah. I'm part of the Texas delegation. I live in Austin, and we're actually, people think of Texas, they think red, but we're one of the largest delegations in the entire convention because there's more Democrats in Texas than there are like human beings in a bunch of other states. So we got a big presence here.
Yeah. Let's just get right into that real quick. Tell us the hot take on the future of Texas politics, because as demographics change, as ideas change, and arguably as they get more extreme on the right, people change their minds, and we desperately want to get rid of Ted Cruz. But what's the truth? What's the real analysis of the near future of Texas politics, not only nationally, but obviously you've worked in the Texas House. We know a lot about that.
Yeah. Blue Texas is not an if, it's a when. Texas has consistently, going back, you can look at the numbers since Barack Obama's election, we have continued to cut down on margin after margin, getting closer and closer. Ted Cruz, you mentioned, last time he was up for re-election against Beto O'Rourke, he skated by. We're talking just percentage points here on the margin now. So as I said, it's not an if, but it's a win. Ted Cruz is a deeply unpopular politician. He's up for re-election again right now. Our nominee, Colin Allred, is fundraising like a madman. He's going to be able to put up a real fight here. And I do think that is going to transition to seeing results down ballot as well. The Texas Houses and the Texas legislature is increasingly extreme. We have an abortion ban. They're trying to push private school voucher scams. And this is turning off more and more voters every day as they cater to an increasingly smaller fraction of a primary base.
That's really interesting. I want to talk to you more in the future about Texas politics for sure, because you have your finger on the pulse and all the players. So that's really important. But let's just talk about the youth as a whole. Generally, you're obviously in charge of the Youth Council. You're the president. Is that right? President of Youth Council.
Yeah, chair of the DNC's Youth Council. Yep.
What is that organization and what is your job?
So that is the umbrella organizing group for all the youth programs put out by the national party. So examples of things that we've done. We've made sure that we've been giving grants to people doing organizing and voter registration on college campuses. We're trying to reach non-traditional youth in other spaces. And the energy in young spaces right now, I cannot stress how just off the charts it has been in just the past month. And I don't think it's a surprise, because it is clear that the Harris campaign has not just been speaking to young folks and meeting us where we are, but has been putting young people into high positions in power on the campaign, especially in messaging. Having young people communicate with young people pays dividends.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely doing that.
Yeah, why trust the olds? Seriously. Like, you're going to convince the people that are probably most like you and arguably have shared interests. And one shared interest for young people is the future, say, of the planet and obviously of the country. So why do you young people still vote Democrat? What do you say to somebody who's saying you just want to register them because they're going to vote Democrat? The argument obviously is if you can convince them to vote Republican, good luck. They're up. We're registering them to vote. They have a choice of who they get to vote for. But why do you young people generally overwhelmingly vote for Democrats?
Yeah, I often say that young people are not just the future of the Democratic Party, but we're the present. We are one of the largest and most loyal voting blocs. The issue with young folks is usually not, are they voting Republican or Democrat, or it's, are they voting Democrat or staying home? That's what we have to work with. It's getting that enthusiasm and getting over it. Because when you just look at the issues that the parties put forward, right? Here's an example. The young folks are increasingly, just each generation is increasingly more queer than the previous one. We have people coming out all the time. And when you contrast that, you have a conservative party that is trying to do everything they can to act like trans folks don't exist and push them away back into the closet, that fought marriage equality tooth and nail. These are existential issues for folks like this. And so when they see a party that is welcoming them, championing their issues versus one that like wants to act like they don't exist or worse than that, it's night and day. And young generations are also increasingly significantly more diverse. In Texas, for instance, the younger generations are majority minority. And so when you have a party that is increasingly centralizing power among primarily older white folks, the Republicans put up a party that does not look like us, whereas the Democratic Party is made up of people like us.
Yeah, very well said. So let me just go back to the switch. My 19 and 16-year-olds were not that excited about Joe Biden. And obviously my 16-year-old can't vote, but she's pretty engaged. And the switch occurs and they are fired up. It's an anecdote. It's just my kids. I don't talk to nearly enough young people, which is why I'm really excited to talk to you. But what did the switch do for people under a certain age, whatever arbitrary number people want to say is young? What did it do?
Yeah, it's not just an anecdote. It's across the board. And this has always been a strength of Democrats. When you have a candidate that has a generational difference, think Bill Clinton versus H.W. Bush, think Barack Obama versus McCain and Romney. The energetic difference that you see among young voters is incredibly clear. And that is now what this election is. The Trump campaign, they spent years leading up to this saying, can't elect an old man. There's no energy behind an old man, falling asleep at the wheel. Now the only old man on the ticket is Donald Trump. And so when they've spent this whole time building this ecosystem, and we're all hearing that, we're all taking that in, and then all of a sudden we see an old man in a challenger that's from a younger generation, there you go. If they were the ones putting all the tinderbox together and threw the match in. And so young folks are ready to go.
What are your, maybe, I don't know how you would chart such things in terms of data, but what are your thoughts, at least, Andre, on especially young men who have increasingly become, I use the word radicalized by certain podcasters, YouTubers, books, whatever, but I'm thinking Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, and many others. It's frightening to hear about my friends' sons turning Jordan Peterson. I think he's probably been more effective than anybody else with young men. Is that something that we just remark upon because it's so sad and upsetting to see young men go down that path towards grievance and anger and sexism and the rest? Or is it a frighteningly large percentage of young men especially that are listening to that stuff and I say being radicalized by it? Maybe you wouldn't use the same words.
No, I actually fully agree with you. And I talk about this a lot. I think that is like the existential issue that we are actually facing among young generations is that we have, and I say we as just like a broad, not even the party, but like a broad infrastructure of society have conceded an entire area of influence in social media and especially on streaming on things like Twitch and Kick to a predominantly conservative space. And with a fractured media landscape, a previous generation not having access to that, we might have similar shared role models. But when you fracture off in these spaces, you have people consuming completely different things growing up. And just unfortunately, due to how the algorithms work on YouTube and TikTok, it sees, hey, you like this, it's going to suggest the next person, and it gets a little more right-wing, and then suddenly they've slipped down the rabbit hole. I think that's a fundamental issue. I don't have a silver bullet fix for it, but it's something that we have to do before we lose a swath of a generation.
Yeah, when you say swath and when you make it more realistic by the way you're talking, I don't know how many people are we talking about? What percentage of young men where so much of it lives online? Are there these organizations on campus, even at high schools? I feel like there are some, which is even crazier to imagine. But how do you describe in terms of percentage or portions? I'm not even sure it matters. The only thing that matters is trying to prevent young men from going down those rabbit holes.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why it's a little hard to put something concrete on it is because some of this media landscape is reaching people that are younger than they're too young to poll. They're too young to vote. We don't exactly have polling data of high school freshmen, right? We're not looking at that. When they're polling people, they're looking at like likely voters and stuff like that. And there's some fraction of this audience that we can't tell what that is. But unfortunately, you can look at the subscriber counts of some of these like young male conservative influencers, and there's some really big numbers out there. So does that chart 1-to-1 on all of them being young people listen? No, but there's definitely a correlation there. But overall, we still know in terms of young voters, in terms of young activists, it is still predominantly Democratic, predominantly progressive. But that doesn't mean there isn't, from my perspective, that darkness that is creeping. Do you ever engage one-on-one with guys like that? How do you approach? Is there an approach to it? They find out who you are. You probably have a bit of a target. They might even approach you first knowing who you are. But do you ever get into discussions with the Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate types? They do end up in my social media mentions. And currently for work in my day job, I work for a young brown man, progressive politician who's got some real toxic folks that get into his mentions as well. I see them around. And you had mentioned I work in the Texas House. That was that's controlled by Republicans. So in day-to-day work, I was used to having to work with Republicans, and it is really different. I've been able to watch as people that used to be longtime good government Republican staffers that, though I had policy disagreements with them, they tried to be stewards of their work. And as they have retired or been pushed out and been replaced with like MAGA loyalists, you are seeing the institutional side of the Republican Party crumble away and get replaced with this more edgy MAGA side. Yeah, wow, gross. That's terrible news, but I guess expected. What are the issues that that you hear from your members and from young people the most? I'll guess women's reproductive rights, racism, anti-racism, immigrant issues, Gaza, West, and the Middle East, and I would imagine almost everybody thinks about climate. What am I missing? Yeah, I think you hit all of the only other major one I would say is student loan debt relief. Or guns, man. Oh, yes. Guns are a big one, right? This is the March for Our Lives generation. Yeah. This is the generation of Parkland. Unfortunately, the generation coming up behind me is the generation of Uvalde. We haven't fixed it. We went from millennials in Gen X having Columbine, and then Gen Z having Parkland, and now Gen Alpha has Uvalde. And we keep not fixing these fundamental issues. So guns are a big one. And then student loan debt relief is a major one, especially as the Biden administration continues to try, and they're whittling away on what they can, but then the courts keep blocking every other attempt. And so while they've been able to do stuff, there's still billions and billions of dollars on these student loans, and that compounds itself. And so that's part of why you see lower levels of home ownership, of capital investment, of savings, because instead of getting to do that, young folks, every paycheck immediately got to throw some right back to that student loan debt. And Governor Tim Walz spoke with Youth Council yesterday. That was incredibly inspiring. And he talked about student loan debt. And he talked about how the generation before him took care of his generation. And they didn't have student loan debt because they were funding colleges, and college tuition hadn't inflated or been deregulated. Right. And they weren't put in the same trappings that we have been. And so that's why it's so serious. How do you recruit? How do you fight the apathy that most young people have? There are a few exceptions for any number of reasons why you might be an engaged young person into social issues, politics, etc., social justice. But what do I say to my kids, and what do parents listening do and say to their kids to get them engaged in these issues that are so important? Mm-hmm. I believe that all of the best outreach comes from the people that are most like you. So that is why it is important that the Harris Walz campaign is willing to elevate so many young voices and put young people into important positions in the campaign, because that spreads. That you see young people in party leadership all the way down to the lowest levels of the party. You have young staffers, young activists. And so it is a much easier sell when there's someone from your generation, from your background, y'all go to college together, you went to the same high school, something like that, speaking to you one-on-one about the issues that you lived together, than it is just catching the coverage on CNN from some talking heads. Right. That's a lot harder to connect to. And so that is why it is vitally important that the Democratic Party invest in youth, because it pays dividends out. You like that? You like that Tim Walz? He was my pick. I was over the moon, and I definitely know there was a ton of energy behind him, just because you could see it in young spaces, how much he has consistently in his service invested in the generations younger than him, going all the way down to making sure that kids in schools aren't paying for lunch and breakfast. He's got that record we see it. We love to lift them up.
I love it. And have you met Kamala Harris?
I got to meet her as vice president. She also was working really hard on youth issues. She did a whole college tour a couple of years back, speaking to students on campuses about many of the issues we've talked about now, gun violence being a major one, abortion access being a major one, queer issues being a major one. She was willing to go on that front line and do these kinds of meetings. And so I got the chance to meet her, thank her for that, and thank the administration for what it had been doing on student loan debt. So
that's awesome.
That was great.
That's great, man. I really appreciate you talking to me. I'm really excited. You get me excited talking to young people and seeing all the things that they're doing and that you're doing and how much you care about it. It makes me feel real good about the future. So I'm sure we will talk again. Have a great time there. And thank you so much for talking to me, Andre.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. Of course. I could talk about this all day, but as you can tell, I'm literally running out of my voice as we go because it's just been cheering so much all week.
Save the rest for something more important than me. Thanks so much, man.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Andre Treiber, everybody. There you go. First time on the show. Wasn't he great? DNC Youth Council Chair, real cool guy from Texas who I loved connecting with. Thank you again to Abigail Hummel for introducing him to me. I wish I could be at the DNC. I'm not. I couldn't be. Whatever. And she is, though. So we're very, very happy and feel super fortunate about that. We'll check in with her later. That's all I've got for you. I hope you liked it. I am so thankful to you for joining me here today. And anytime that you do, tell your friends, sign up for a paid subscription, and I will talk to you right here tomorrow. Hopefully see you at tonight's hangout, everybody. Bye-bye, my bumblebees. John Carroll does all the music for the show. Go to johncarroll.org and buy it. Support him right now.
For the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with a leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.